Hello, everyone. My name is Jason. I recently had a conversation with my good friend Johnny Cassidy about what it takes to be successful with everything going on at the moment. I hope you'll find what we talked about helpful, and yeah, let's jump right into it.
I want to get started. So I'm going to record this meeting. Um, and basically, what I want this kind of series to be that I'm doing on my YouTube
Mhm.
channel is because, like, there's a lot kind of going on in the world and there's a lot of uncertainty. It based on kind of times in my life, those were always the times where I think people meaning anyone, can just lose motivation and kind of lose all hope really quickly and whatnot. And I wanted to kind of reach out and collaborate and kind of have a discussion about how can people stay motivated, how can they still kind of go after their goals. And even if it's not in the ideal circumstances, I think one of the things I've
Yeah.
certainly learned is that you can not always control what happens out of your control, but you can kind of control, like, your reaction to it, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I feel that.
Uh, so yeah, cool. My first question, if I'm just going to dive right into them, is what are ways you would recommend uh, what are ways you would recommend to set goals?
Uh, I don't know. What's your answer to that first?
I guess my answer is that um, I think there's no kind of right way to set goals. I think there's different ways that they work for different people.
Mhm.
So once you find the one that works for you, um, I think just stick to it and kind of go for it.
Yeah, I was gonna say kind of like that. Um, but like if I were to recommend it, it would just be kind of like kind of get to know yourself and how you operate and like figure out like in the past like what you've done like through until completion, and then figure out what like kind of got you to that. Was it because it was an assignment? Was it because it had a deadline? Like we all have different ways of responding to inspiration, and sometimes a lot of it's pressure or it's somebody else setting the goal for us. And I guess um, I would recommend trying to be that person for yourself. Is like give yourself a deadline, um, like be your inspiration. Do what it takes to kind of inspire yourself to make sure whatever the goal is that it happens, and that like it happens in a way that like you could discipline yourself that it does happen. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that that's a really good way to put it. One thing, kind of, we were just talking about YouTube a couple seconds ago, and one of the
Mhm,
things I tend to do with myself is I get in my own head,
mhm.
and I'm just like, oh, I'll get to it later,
Yeah,
or oh no, like no one's gonna like it,
yeah.
and so I just put it off, and I come up with all these scenarios that don't necessarily happen. I mean, sometimes they do, but most 9 times out of 10 they don't actually happen, and so
Yeah.
I end up putting stuff off. And so I'd recommend don't do that. Just as I said, just go for it, and then you'll learn very quickly if it's something you want to continue doing or not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The second one was, do you think it's important to reflect on uh, past or present accomplishments? And likewise, do you think it's a mistake to kind of dwell on uh, like past mistakes or things that didn't quite work out?
Are you asking me, or do you want to answer this one too?
Uh, I guess I'll answer this one.
Uh,
But I want you to answer it as well. But the way I kind of see it is, uh, I think they're kind of I think they're kind of opposite. So with like with accomplishments, like, you kind of have to take that time to go after them and be like, yes, this is something I did and I'm proud of it. But with
mhm.
something that didn't quite work out, like a mistake or something, if you dwell on it too much, I think that that could lead into the present moment and why things uh, might be kind of, and it could become kind of a spiral, I guess.
Yeah.
What would you add on to that?
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's important to reflect on accomplishments because it's so quick in today that we're like, okay, that's done. Let's do the next thing. Um, like it's all about like a list of things you want to get done. It's not about the process. It's not about, it's like looking at, our goals as material things that once we get it, it's just check off the list. But it's important to make sure you sit back and you're like, okay, I set out to do that and I did it. And like almost
Absolutely, yeah.
use that as like your like as a way to get yourself more motivated, as in like I'm able to do this. This is something that's in my control. And I think that's like a lot of like what these questions have to do is just like are you able to kind of have control over how you like perceive things, like what's failure, what's this, and can you convince yourself that you're not a failure? Because dwelling on past mistakes is almost like you trying to talk yourself into um like believing that you're a failure so you could force so that gets you to work harder, but that's not
Right,
always the case. Sometimes it's you could kind of reflect on your accomplishments and be able to use that as just as much as like using that as a failure to motivate you and be able to be like, okay, yes, like I accomplished something, like let me take a quick break and enjoy that for a little bit. Like let me figure out what it was that made me do that. Like how did I accomplish this? What did I do to do that?
right.
And use that as fuel as opposed to, oh, this was my mistake. I mean, dwelling and learning from are completely different. Um, but obviously nobody should ever dwell on past mistakes, but reflecting on accomplishments are definitely things you can do, or like important things that are healthy to do.
Right. Yeah, I would really agree with that. I think when you reflect on something, it's a lot different, and it can almost give like a certain or a different type of motivation. Because if you're just like, oh, I'm not good enough or whatever, and then
Mhm.
that's your motivator. At
Yeah.
some point, like that's how I'm speaking from past experience here. Like that's how people crash, I think, and
Yeah.
or it can be anyway. Whereas like if you, and I'm not saying people have to be positive all the time either, because
Mhm.
life unfortunately doesn't work that way. But if you're have the mindset of like I'm worth it, I do the best that I can,
Mhm.
like that's your motivator to get up every morning and do everything uh, that your goals are. I think that's a really more positive way to look at it versus just
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's really important to um to learn how to understand the balance for yourself, because you can't just be positive, and you definitely can't just be negative. You have to have a sprinkle of it's almost just like what can I do to make this better,
right.
not in a sense that it wasn't good, but it's like, oh, how can I make this even better than it was before? I really like the way this turned out, but what more can I do? And next time when I go through this, like what's something even better?
No, I do get what you're saying. Um,
um Going on past mistakes, just because it opens the door for like different questions.
yeah, it kind of does. Also, these questions are I do think these questions are kind of general, but I think that they're supposed to like be a way of like going about what's like just I did that intentionally, I guess, just because of uh how I want to structure this.
Let's go to the fourth question.
Okay.
I think that'll help, like with this one.
Okay. So yeah, so in uncertain times, what are ways to stay motivated as an artist, filmmaker, or entrepreneur?
Mm, Um, so I think it's important to separate yourself from, because times will always be uncertain. Whether
Right.
it's, whether it's this thing going on in our world, or there was like probably a million things to be complained about or be stressed about, before. Um, but I think it's important to be able to separate and kind of revisit your own world. And because when we're talking about being an artist or a filmmaker, we're kind of talking about um, the beauty of like how one like relates to oneself in order to make this kind of art. So being able to kind of stay motivated is a way of like you have to use life as your partner, um, not as your not as your enemy. It's
Yeah, yeah,
like you work side by side with what's going on, and it's you have to turn negative things, positive things, and everything in between into ammo that you kind of use to be able to churn out something that is important or something that means something to you. Something you have to know yourself to be able to generate your response and the important message you want behind it. Like what are you what's important to you about what's happening, and what's important for you. What do you think needs to be said if you were to stand up in front of everybody and tell them something that would also work for you? How could what would you say? And then it's like, okay.
right,
And then it's like, how could you say that in a different way that like really resonates with you? Like, are you somebody who
right.
draws? Are you somebody who writes? And it's almost like you have to encourage yourself to be your biggest fan and be like, okay,
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
something that an artist that I would truly follow say in a time like this? And kind of like be the expert on yourself, and be your own manager and be like, you need to get out there and do this. You need to, this is, stay motivated to get yourself, to really get in touch with yourself, and learn how to respond to what's going on. If that makes
exactly.
sense. What do you think?
Well, I guess just touching on some of the points that you made, I think one of the things that I've really wanted to address for a while, whether it's in a video or a short film or whatever, is that I think the idea of social distancing, whether this virus and everything going on in the world is over in 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years,
Mhm. You're
doesn't.
saying you hate it, and you've been going to everybody you meet, right? Like you've been shaking hands. Is that what you're about to say?
That's not. I mean, that's that's not
You're
what I was
starting
going to
Facebook.
say.
You're starting Facebook groups with all the people, and you're like, okay, we're gonna meet up. We don't care what the government says.
uh, shh. No, what I was gonna say is I think that, and I don't want to get too political, but I think that idea of instead of physical distance, it's like social distance, like because even like we're connecting like over a computer and we're still having a conversation,
Yeah.
but there's physical distance there. We're still socializing. I think if people don't really read into that, it's still the idea of social distancing can be uh, kind of dangerous because it kind of draws up a couple implications of what will uh, what will friendships look like uh, in the future. What will relationships look like? What will family dynamics look like? It's something that I'm nervous about, and I don't know if I actually have to be nervous about, but I think it's a political topic I'm interested in, and it's something that could make for interesting discussion through art, I guess, kind of adding on to what you were saying. And I get that, like, everything going on, obviously people need to stay safe, but if there's more if there's more communication being like, oh, like stay 5 feet away from me before uh having like an actual conversation. Even like, I'm not saying like now, like obviously now that's important, but like let's say like in the future when this whole thing is contained, like
Hmm.
there's still that like fear of other people, if you will. I think that's kind of, that can be a dangerous way of
Yeah,
interacting with people.
yeah, like how everything's gonna like nothing's gonna just go back to normal.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's nice to like I don't know, like once this thing is over, it's obviously going to lead to a lot of people learned a lot about this, and people are gonna have a lot to say. So it's gonna take us into a generation of new media and new storytelling.
Exactly, yeah, which will be pretty interesting.
Oh wait, you're frozen. Did you see the quarantine episode of my show?
No, I haven't seen that one yet, but I saw like a couple clips on Instagram, the one where he's like Nolan's like stay like 5 feet away from me, and he gets up like on the table.
Yeah, you
I
should
thought
you should
I thought that
watch
was really
that.
funny.
No, yeah, watch it. It's just making fun of it, but it's like important at this time to be able to still laugh and still like we've always commented on everything in life before, so why should we stop now?
Like,
Like,
exactly, yeah.
but yeah, like we like that's why it's important to not look like the world is ending, or like we've hit the reset button many times, like just in history, and every time, obviously it's not like things will never not get better. Like
Right.
this is only, the things that are bad with the world are only the beginning of how we can use them to better communicate with each other, to further our art. Like the more we learn about the human condition, the more we learn about how we respond to things, the more experts we become on ourselves and other people, as best we can, the better, like the more art there is to make. It's like it feels like the new season of a show right now. Like the pandemic was the season finale,
Yeah.
and then yeah, and it's kind of like what's going to change with these characters, and how's the world of the show going to change next season? It's just another season of a show.
And I think that's a good one to go along with like what are the ways to stay motivated?
Yeah, we could even combine those.
Okay.
So what are ways to realize strengths and weaknesses? Do you want to answer this one? What are some ways to realize strengths and weaknesses?
I think, see, this one isn't, I think, as easy because if you realize something about yourself, like when I realized uh that like I don't really want to be a director, it's just something that like I put in my head that I wanted to do, but it's not something that I'm actually, it's not my strong suit. Like my strong suit is working with other people. It's not
Hmm.
being the top person, if you will. And so when I
Hmm.
realized that, I didn't really want to address it because it was heartbreaking, right? Like I wanted to be a director since I was
Yeah.
like this tall, and so I think it was important having like that conversation with like myself and just saying like, look, I know I don't really want to address that, but if I'm gonna move forward, like I need to know one way or the other what I'm gonna do, if you will. And that's kind of, I guess, where the question was coming from.
Hmm.
Is I think like when you have those conversations with yourself, sometimes like we just kind of push it out because like it's uncomfortable or we don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Um, but I think sometimes like when we do take care of that stuff, and even though it's yucky and whatnot, I think it leaves room for personal growth, not just in careers, but also as like people. That's how I would answer it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Um, like to be able to come to terms with what what you know, you're good at, what you know, you're good at, what you could be working more on, Um, and but we're talking about kind of in context of this pandemic, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, so we could also kind of touch on that within like how are some ways you realize this like now, at this point in time.
Right.
Like
Uh,
this is a time where we're in a pandemic, so we have a lot of time to get to know ourselves and get to see what silence like means to us and who we are in that silence, which is hard to which we haven't had silence in a long time.
right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like it's like now we can afford to ask ourselves the questions: what is it you like what because the person we were like probably 3 or 4 years ago or 2 years ago or whenever we last got our silence, um like emotionally, it's different.
It is. Yeah.
We should be having silence once a day, but we haven't had it in a long time. So to be able to like take advantage of it and really sit in and meditate about what it is we want to do, what it is we're not good at, what it is that we want to improve on, and then what it is that like makes us happy, and what, especially within our careers, like what is my strength, what is my weakness. I want to improve this weakness. I want to get better at this strength. It's just like being able to get in touch with yourself and see what you want to work on is like important. Like when you come out of this, when we come out of this time, like we need to be able to look back and be like, without sitting, without that pandemic, I would have never learned this about myself, or I would have
Right.
never gotten to this point. Like this is something where we can't look back and be like, oh, remember when that happened? It's no, like, like they always have episodes of shows where, something happens and like they all get, and it all changes them. So it's like we need to
Right.
make
Yeah.
sure
Yeah.
that this isn't just an episode we skip over, but, one of the most important ones that we sit back and we're like without this time, we never would have, got to hear. It's important to like help, like it, like, so it's important to use the silence and use the moment of reflection to realize what your strengths and weaknesses are, and figure out like what your new set of goals are going to be, either when you leave this or even right now during it.
In cases like this where there is a lot of unknown,
Mhm.
uh, and like you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, maybe it's better to put like your goals on hold and just focus on friends, family,
Mhm.
focus on yourself more, because it's very rare that you get that you know you time, for a lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you go out into the career, whether it's college, working for a job, whatever it is, it's boom, 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 or uh, that's kind of the way I look at it. So if you're if you've got those goals and that drive to push forward, that's great. But
Mhm.
I think it's also important to know, like, okay, it'll still be there 30 days from now, like a month from now, whenever this whole thing ends. Those aren't really going anywhere. It just might be a better idea stress wise, and uh, for everyone's sake around us, to just put it to the side for until everything kind of settles down.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but also I think it's important, like that for every individual person, it's like a wake up call, and we have to figure out like kind of how that's going to like wake us up, because some people um might use it as a moment of like, oh my god, like now I've run out of excuses,
I
like
see what you mean. Yeah.
like I've always put stuff aside, and now I literally have nothing else to do but actually take another step on the story I wanted to tell. Some of us have
Right.
been telling stories constantly and like need this break, and that's important too. It's like we've kind of gotten comfortable with how we pump out material, how we our schedule, but also it's time to really like teach ourselves discipline. And it's like, what are you going to do when somebody's not telling you what to do? Like
Right.
how do you respond, and how do you put a schedule to yourself? And like it's almost like it granted us, like, okay, you get no other distractions. Who
Right.
are you going to hide from yourself, or are you going to, obviously it adds some extra layers, which is just like kind of fear and like what's going on, but it's also just allowing yourself to kind of get to know yourself more. And
Absolutely. And that was one of the things that was really important to me even before this whole pandemic uh came about, is uh kind of teaching myself personal accountability and
yeah,
learning that whole thing
yeah,
uh kind of on my own. I mean, I did take a semester off, and I guess that was kind of my wake up call. When I did that, I was very angry for 2 weeks,
hmm,
and after I kind of got over it for that time, uh, I started creating a schedule for myself, and I feel like
hmm,
I'm a better person for it. But no, kind of going uh, after, like, or kind of adding on to what you were saying, like that was
hmm,
my wake up call. But I feel like I agree with you that some people may have theirs like now because they are just like,
yeah,
oh, I've got nothing else to do. I have to
yeah.
learn this.
Hmm. In terms of personal growth and creativity, I mean, in terms of like history and like how people are going about this, obviously it's a completely different story. um
Right.
there's precautions we should be taking. It's really important that we stay inside, and then we do these things to follow, keeping people safe. But in terms of us as creatives, and if we're coming at that perspective, this is a wake up call for us, and we need to figure out what it is we want to do, and figure out if we're the kind of person that puts things off, and if we're the kind of person that puts things off, or if we're the kind of person that needs somebody else to tell us to do it. Kind of identify ourselves and see if this is really what we want to do, and if this is, and how we want to tell our stories. And if maybe some people realize, like, oh, okay, I just don't want to, like, I can't. um you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I mean, I guess, like, I wouldn't encourage that, but it's fine, like, if that's what people want to do, because
Hmm.
obviously I can't be like, oh, you have to do this like this way. uh
No, yeah, yeah,
um
I
but obviously I want to use this platform on YouTube to encourage people to uh update their lives, if you will, to uh be the best that they can be.
Yeah, definitely, I agree.
Is there a
Okay,
personal factor with motivation, even in uncertainty?
the answer is yes.
Well, that was easy.
uh, yeah, good, you answer, go ahead.
I think there is a personal factor, but I also think it depends on the point in which you're going at things, like where you are in your own personal journey. So if
Hmm.
obviously, like, if you're an adult, like, no one's going to tell you get up in the morning, brush your teeth, do your homework. Like, no one's going to tell you to do those things, because obviously you should probably be doing them anyway. But where
Hmm.
I'm kind of coming at it is, like, in order to kind of be who you want to be, you should have a reason that you get up in the morning and that drives you forward. And if
Hmm.
you don't have one, I think that's a and you don't really know what you want to do yet, that should be what you try and find, like, what motivates me, whether it's, you know, like, whatever it is, try and find that thing, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. um like being able to find, the thing that, like, is, I mean, like, you just, like, when you think about you as an artist, it's just like, why are you doing this?
Right.
And, and then it's also just saying, like, okay, well, there's something going on that's like this. do you still need to tell that story right now? And it might be, it might be like, you might be somebody that advocates for mental health, or um like, or like rights of some kind. And it's like, okay, well, the pandemic hasn't changed that, like it hasn't changed your goal of like your personal, like what you want to see change in the world.
Right.
And so what is it you want to see change in the world? And is this pandemic going to change it? No. Are you going to change it? Yeah. Then this is just a break to figure out how you're gonna kind of go about it when we get done, or this is how you're gonna plan. Like it's however you want to go about it.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So yeah, that was our conversation. Johnny is a super cool guy, and he's got a passion for television, and he's working on a couple projects right now at the moment. I'll have a link below in the description to his YouTube channel. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Be sure to give it a like if you found it useful, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.